Daughter of the Wind. Chapter 1. The Whispering Sands. The sun hung low over the endless expanse of desert, casting long shadows across dunes that moved like waves in a golden sea. The desert, known to the Jaran as Arak's Vale, whispered secrets to those who listened, the winds speaking of past glories and coming storms. Among these ancient sands, a lone rider cut a path across the horizon. Kalira, the Windborn, sat astride her ash-gray mare, Ashar, whose hooves barely disturbed the dust. Kalira wore layered leather armor dyed in the earth tones of her people, her face half covered by a veil to shield against the wind. Her scimitar, curved like the crescent moon, hung at her back beside a quiver of bone-feathered arrows. Overhead, her hawk companion, Siran, soared silently, his sharp eyes scanning the dunes below. She was no ordinary warrior. Kalira had been raised among the nomads, but trained by an outcast warrior monk in the echoing canyons. She learned to read the wind, sense danger through vibrations in the sand, and wield her weapons like extensions of her will. The tribe called her the Windborn, after she survived a desert storm that should have buried her alive, walking from the wreckage with no more than a cut across her brow and eyes that glowed with otherworldly fire. Today, a different kind of storm brewed. She had heard whispers in the last watering hole, stories exchanged over bitter tea and shisha smoke. Travelers spoke of smoke pillars rising near the sacred oasis of Juhan, and of men in dark steel armor whose language no Jaran tongue could decipher. That oasis was no ordinary landmark. It was the spiritual and logistical heart of her people's migratory path, a place where chieftains were crowned and healers communed with the spirits of the dunes. If it fell, the soul of the Jaran people might fall with it. Kalira paused atop a high dune and let the desert winds kiss her face. She reached into her saddlebag and removed a small carved bone whistle. With a long, low breath, she blew into it. The sound was barely audible to human ears, but Siran, high above, responded with a cry. "Find them," she whispered. "Tell me what I cannot see." As the hawk veered westward toward the oasis, Kalira drew her scimitar and held it before her, letting the dying light of the sun catch its blade. She murmured a prayer, not of hope, but of clarity. There would be blood. There would be war. But first, there would be the wind. With a gentle squeeze of her knees, she urged Ashur forward. The mare galloped, sure-footed and swift, as night descended upon Arak's Vale. Kalira rode toward destiny, alone, but not afraid. Chapter 2. Shadows at the Oasis. Kalira arrived at Juhan under the cover of night. The wind carried the smell of charred wood and something fouler. Blood. She dismounted, crouching low, her senses sharpening like the edge of her blade. The oasis, once a sacred sanctuary ringed with date palms and white stone shrines, had become a camp of occupation. Fires flickered between hastily pitched black tents, casting long shadows on the crimson-stained sand. Figures moved with military precision, their armor glinting dully beneath the moonlight. These were not desert raiders or tribal enemies. They were foreign soldiers, better equipped, disciplined, and utterly ruthless. Kalira crept forward, her form melting into the darkness. She hid behind a fallen palm, her keen eyes noting details, the sigils on the armor, an eclipsed sun set within a black circle, and the strange, clipped language they spoke. She counted at least 30 soldiers, and more moved in and out of the shrine grounds. Her breath caught as she saw them, the Jaran captives. Dozens of her people, men and women both, bound with rope and kept near the sacred spring. Some bore fresh wounds, others had the look of those who had seen the end and returned. Rage threatened to consume her, but she bit it back. The time for vengeance would come. A sudden cry from above. Siran. The hawk circled once, then dipped low, signaling a nearby patrol. Kalira vanished into the shadows just as two soldiers approached. Their speech was foreign, but their actions spoke clearly. One pointed toward the spring, then drew a crude map in the dirt. They were preparing something, perhaps reinforcements or excavation. Her instincts flared. The soldiers stopped, turning their heads. One narrowed his eyes at the darkness where she crouched. Kalira stilled her breath, readying a throwing knife just in case. But after a moment, they moved on. She exhaled and eased back into the dunes, returning to Ashar's hidden shelter. As she mounted, her mind spun. She could not fight an army alone. Not yet. But there were others in the desert, exiled clans, smugglers, old allies who still owed her blood debts. The invaders had made their first mistake. They left the Windborn alive. With the moon high above her, Kalira turned her steed westward. It was time to call upon the forgotten. Chapter 3. Allies in the Sand. Kalira rode westward beneath a sky riddled with stars, each one a memory, a marker of the paths her people had followed for generations. Her destination lay beyond the veiled reaches, an expanse of broken cliffs and ancient burial stones where the forgotten and exiled made their home. It was not just danger that waited there, but possibility. 2 days passed in hard travel. She lived on dates and dried meat, drank sparingly from her water skin, and relied on Siren to scout ahead. The hawk found no sign of pursuit, but Kalira knew better than to relax. The Black Sun soldiers had seen what she was capable of, and they would not rest. At dusk on the 3rd day, she reached the scarred cliffs of Shal's Maw, a gorge cleaved by time and tremors. Smoke curled from within, thin, discreet. Kalira dismounted and led Asher by the reins into the narrow canyon. The first arrow struck the sand 2 paces from her foot. "Hold!" she called in the Jaran tongue, arms raised. "I seek the blood debt of Garesh the Silent." There was a pause. Then a rasping voice echoed from the shadows. "Windborn, you live." From the rock emerged a weathered man wrapped in sun-bleached robes. Garesh, once a chieftain, now an exile. His eyes were sharp as ever, and though the years had bent his back, they had not dulled his mind. Behind him came others, outcasts, desert rogues, fighters with nothing to lose. "I need blades," Kalira said, "and silence." Garesh nodded once. "Speak." Around a fire, Kalira shared what she had seen: the black-armored invaders, the occupation of Yuhan, the prisoners. She told them of the desecration of the sacred spring and of the children held in chains. Murmurs rippled through the gathered outcasts. Some growled, others wept. "They call themselves the Empire of the Black Sun," Kalira said. "They seek to tame the desert, burn it if they must. They think us broken, but we are wind and sand and steel. We endure." Silence followed. Then Garesh stood. "What do you need?" Kalira looked around the fire, into the eyes of the ragged yet unyielding. "Scouts, saboteurs. I need to bleed them dry before they call reinforcements. And I need Terran." A murmur again. "The seer?" "He wanders the wastes," one said. "He's mad." "He's also the only one who can awaken the talismans of the old shrines," Kalira replied. "We'll need more than steel." Garesh cracked a dry smile. "You haven't changed." "No, she said, but the desert has. By dawn, a dozen riders had pledged to her cause. Old rivals shook hands, outlaws sharpened blades, and Kylera, the Windborn, once again became more than a legend. She became a rallying cry. With Siren circling high, she rode out again, toward the wastes, toward the seer, and the storm that would follow. Chapter 4. The Seer of the Wastes. The wastes were a place of silence and mirage, where the very bones of the earth lay exposed. No sane soul lingered in its blinding vastness, and fewer returned once they entered. Yet Kylera pressed onward, her resolve as unshakable as the sun that scorched her path. Garesh had warned her. Taran no longer answered to reason or time. The old seer had once walked with the high chieftains, communed with spirits, and carved wards into the stones of shrines. Then, after the last war of embers, he vanished into the wastes with a madman's laughter and a bundle of relics on his back. She rode for 3 days, following faint signs, abandoned cairns, talismanic carvings, and the distant sound of bone chimes whispering in the wind. Sirens soared overhead, scouting for movement, but only dust and silence met them. On the 4th morning, Kylera saw it, a hill of black stone rising like a spine from the sand, and at its peak, a broken dome surrounded by fluttering strips of cloth. As she approached, the air shifted. The temperature dropped. The wind howled without direction. Even Ashar grew restless. "Taran!" she called, dismounting and climbing the ridge. "Taran of the Old Circle! It is Kylera Windborn who seeks you." A figure stepped into view, a tall, emaciated man with a wild gray beard and skin darkened by sun and dust. His robes were patched with scripture, charms, and feathers. His eyes burned not with madness, but clarity. "Windborn," Taran rasped, "the desert speaks of you. It remembers your breath, your blood, your oath." Kylera dropped to one knee. "The Jaran bleed. Juhan is taken. The black sun seeks to consume us all. I need your help." Taran tilted his head. "You seek the shrines, the old power, the veiled flames. Yes, you alone can awaken them. We must bind what the wind once scattered." Taran turned and gestured. "Then follow." Within the broken dome lay an altar of cracked stone and a map etched into the floor, ancient paths between long-forgotten shrines. He knelt and traced the lines with a finger trembling with power. 4 shrines remain intact, he said. Each holds a fragment of the breath of Jara, our mother of sand. They are guarded by memory, bound by blood. If we light them, the land may rise. If we fail, it will be lost. Kylera studied the map. One shrine lay within the jagged cliffs of Cernak, another beneath the ruined city of Tharim. The third had sunken into the sands of the Singing Hollow. The fourth, deepest of all, was hidden in the maw of serpents. Taran packed quickly, his movements fluid despite his years. He handed Kylera a bundle of charms, each carved with sigils of binding, protection, and calling. "You will need these, and warriors who believe." They left that night, returning toward Shal's Maw. Kylera briefed Taran on the scale of the enemy, their tactics, and their technology. The old seer listened in silence, then muttered, "They bring iron to a place of spirits. They will pay for their arrogance." Back at camp, Garesh welcomed them with cautious relief. Taran's presence disturbed some of the younger fighters, his mutterings, the relics tied to his robes, but Kylera silenced doubt with a word. "He is our memory. He is our fire." By the fire that night, Taran marked the warriors with dust and ink, whispering old prayers that made the air tremble. Kylara stood before them all, her scimitar at her side, her voice clear. Tomorrow, we strike their patrols. Then we move for the first shrine. Let them feel the storm rising. And beneath the stars, for the first time in generations, the desert prepared to fight back. Chapter 5. Flames in the Dust. Dawn broke over Shal's Maw with a pale light, casting long shadows over the assembled warriors. Kylara stood at the ridge, wind stirring her cloak, her eyes on the horizon. Below, tents flapped and blades were sharpened. Taran moved silently among them, setting charms in the sand and whispering invocations that made even the breeze pause. 2 patrols moved through the valley by dusk, Garesh reported. Lightly armed, but fast. Scouting routes and water sources. Then we'll give them a message to carry back, if any live, Kylara replied. The warriors set out just before noon. The sun burned high, and their movements were hidden by heat shimmer and terrain. Kylara moved with the confidence of someone who had lived her life as sand-bound and sky-blooded. Siren circled above as a sentinel. The ambush was swift. Arrows flew like serpents from the rocks, and Kylara led the charge down the dune ridge with a war cry that echoed across the sands. The first patrol fell before they could raise alarm. The second fought harder, drawing steel and rallying around a black banner marked with the burning eye of the black sun. Kylara danced through the chaos like a storm given flesh. Her scimitar rang against enemy steel, cutting through armor and chain. She fought not for vengeance, but for promise, for her people, scattered but unbroken. When the last soldier dropped to the sand, Kylara raised her bloodied blade high. Behind her, the warriors roared, their voices carrying across the desert. Taran stepped forward and plunged his staff into the sand. From his satchel, he pulled a crystal sphere etched with golden script. He held it aloft. "Jara, see us!" he cried. "We remember the breath of flame." The sand trembled. For a heartbeat, the desert stilled. Then, in the distance, the wind shifted, no longer random but pulsing with rhythm, like the breath of something ancient waking beneath the dunes. Kylara felt it in her bones. The shrine was near. By dusk, they arrived at the cliffs of Surnak. The rocks jutted from the desert like broken teeth, red and sharp. Taran led them into a narrow crevice marked by an old sigil, worn smooth by wind. They entered the shrine through a fissure in the cliff face, descending into a cavern lit by glowing moss and heat vents. At its heart stood a broken obelisk, half buried in rock. Symbols lined its surface, glyphs Kylara had seen only in childhood dreams. "This is where the breath was sealed," Taran said. "But it sleeps." "What must we do?" Kylara asked. "Give it breath," he said, "and blood." Without hesitation, Kylara removed her glove and cut her palm with her blade. She pressed her hand to the obelisk. Heat surged up her arm. Visions of desert storms, of her ancestors walking the dunes, of war and fire flashed through her mind. The obelisk flared with light. Lines of fire crawled across the stone floor, connecting ancient runes. The shrine awakened. Outside, the sky turned copper. A pillar of flame burst from the cliff and curled skyward before fading. Taran dropped to his knees, laughing and weeping. "One flame has risen. 3 remain." Kylara turned to her warriors, her voice iron-bound. "The desert remembers. And now it answers." They would not rest. Not now. The second shrine lay beneath the ruined city of Tharim. And if the Black Sun hadn't known of their return before, they would now. The flame had been lit, and with it, the war for the soul of the sands had truly begun. Chapter 6. Tharim's Bones. Tharim had once been the jewel of the desert, a city carved from golden stone and cooled by underground springs. Now it lay buried beneath sand and silence, its towers broken, its streets filled with ghosts. The winds moaned through its ruins like mourners at a grave. Kalira stood at the edge of the city with her warriors. Taran raised a hand, murmuring incantations that made the sand shift unnaturally. They descended into the husk of Tharim, the sunlight dimming beneath the canopy of fractured stone. "Stay together," Kalira commanded. "The dead here do not rest easily." The deeper they moved, the colder it grew. Kalira could feel the weight of history pressing down on them, the despair of a fallen people, the grief of centuries. Her boots crunched over shattered tile mosaics and bones left untouched by time. Taran halted at a shattered courtyard. In its center stood a dry fountain, and, beside it, a great slab carved with ancient sigils. "Here," he said, placing a relic on the stone. It pulsed once with dull crimson light. "The shrine lies below. We must open the way." With a gesture, Kalira directed her strongest warriors forward. Together, they heaved the slab aside, revealing a spiral stair carved into the bedrock, descending into utter blackness. Taran struck his staff against the stone, and a pale flame bloomed atop it. "The path is old, and bound in wards. Follow only where I tread." The descent took them deep beneath Tharim's bones. Walls shifted with the pressure of years, and whispers clawed at the edges of Kalira's thoughts. Her hand never left the hilt of her blade. At last, they emerged into a vast chamber. Columns rose from sand-choked stone, and at the far end stood the shrine, a shattered pillar entwined in dried vines and chains of brass. Kalira stepped forward, but a shape rose from the shadows. It was not human, nor was it fully spirit. It was something forged in agony, wrapped in rags of memory and hate. Its face was a mask of bone, its eyes endless. "You do not belong," it hissed. "Tharim fell because of your kindness." Kalira stood firm. Tharim fell because it forgot the wind, the sand, the balance. "I am here to restore what was broken." The creature laughed, a sound like a sandstorm in a tomb. "Then bleed for it." The battle that followed was like none before. Blades passed through the spirit as often as they struck true. Taran called on wards, binding it with light and chant. Kalira fought with fire in her blood, her movements guided by memory and instinct. Finally, as the spirit lunged, she drove her blade through the pillar itself. The structure cracked, and a burst of searing light exploded outward, disintegrating the creature with a howl. The shrine lit. Brass chains fell. The vines burned away. The glyphs awakened. Kalira stood over the stone, blood streaming from her arm. She placed her hand upon it once more, and the second flame roared into life. Above, in the ruins of Tharim, the earth shuddered. A tower once collapsed reassembled itself in defiance of time. The winds sang. Taran smiled through his exhaustion. Two flames. The desert rises again. But Kalira's face was grim. Two remain. And now the black sun truly hunts us. They would not linger. The singing hollow awaited, and its silence held more danger than even Tharim's haunted heart. Chapter 7. Silence in the Hollow. The singing hollow was a place spoken of in whispers, even among the Jaran elders. A vast depression in the earth, ringed by cliffs carved by wind and time, where the air itself seemed to hum with forgotten songs. It was said that those who lingered too long heard the voices of the dead, or worse, their own. Kalira and her war band approached under moonlight, their numbers tighter now, each warrior hardened by loss and purpose. Taran walked at her side, muttering spells of warding as the air thickened with tension. "There is something old here," he said. "It listens." The hollow opened before them like a bowl carved into the earth. No birds flew overhead, no insects stirred, only the soft wind, carrying a faint musical resonance like glass vibrating in some unseen hand. As they descended, a mist began to curl from the ground, cold and clinging. The warriors exchanged glances, their hands on their weapons. Kalira paused. Her ears caught the faintest whisper. Her name. She spun, searching the gloom, but there was nothing. Only the hollow. "Keep moving," she ordered. "Don't listen." They reached the heart of the depression by dawn. In the center stood a ring of cracked pillars, each etched with symbols that shimmered faintly when touched by the rising sun. In the middle, a small, unassuming stone altar, blackened by fire and age. "This is it," Taran whispered. "The third shrine. But something is wrong." Kalira stepped forward. "What is it?" Before Taran could answer, the mist surged. Shadows rose from the ground, dozens of them, formless, whispering, their voices an overlapping chorus of sorrow and accusation. They circled the group, drifting just out of reach. One approached Kalira. It wore her face. "You will fail," it said. "You always do." She slashed at it with her blade, but the shadow merely laughed, dispersing like smoke. Taran held aloft a glowing orb. "They are echoes, fragments of guilt and doubt. Do not believe their lies." The warriors stood in a tight circle, fending off the phantoms. Kalira forced herself toward the altar. Each step was a battle, not against the enemy, but herself. The voices grew louder, regrets, fears, failures, her mother's death, her brother's betrayal, the day she ran instead of fought. At the altar, she drew her blade and cut her palm, letting the blood drip onto the stone. "I know who I am," she said aloud, "and I will not be bound by what haunts me." The shrine answered. A shock wave rippled outward, throwing the shadows back. The mist dissipated. The ground shivered as glyphs ignited in a spiraling pattern across the floor. The third flame erupted, not in fire, but in sound, a resonant, harmonic chime that rose into the sky and echoed through the cliffs. Taran sank to his knees, tears in his eyes. 3 flames. 1 remains. Kalira turned to her warriors. Their faces were pale but resolute. "The hollow tried to break us, but we are still standing." As the sun rose higher, the air lightened. Birds returned to the sky. The silence was gone. But far to the east, across the dunes, a new sound grew. The marching drums of the black sun. The final shrine lay in the maw of serpents, and they were no longer ahead of their enemies. They were being hunted. Chapter 8. The Maw of Serpents. The Maw of Serpents was more than a canyon. It was a wound carved into the desert by the gods themselves. Jagged cliffs towered on either side, their faces scarred by time and tempest. From above, the land appeared as if bitten by a colossal beast. Few who entered its depths ever returned. Kalira stood at its edge, her cloak snapping in the wind, eyes narrowed at the stone path snaking between the cliffs. Beneath her boots, the sand was darker, coarser, tainted. "This place reeks of death," Garesh muttered. Taran nodded. "There is no wind here, no life, only watchers." The warband moved in silence, blades drawn, senses sharpened. Shadows danced along the canyon walls, some illusion, some not. Kalira felt every breath like a weight. The shrine was hidden, Taran had warned, deep in the belly of the canyon, warded and buried behind riddles older than even his knowledge. They would need more than strength. They would need to listen. As they descended, Kalira caught signs of movement. Stones shifted that shouldn't have, shapes that vanished when seen directly. She raised a hand. "We're being followed." Moments later, the black sun attacked. From the cliffs they came, cloaked assassins with obsidian blades, warlocks with burning eyes. The first wave struck like lightning, trying to divide the warband. But Kalira was faster. "Hold the line!" she shouted, spinning into the fray. The canyon became a storm of dust and steel. Garesh and the others fought fiercely, but they were outnumbered. Taran erected a wall of shimmering energy, halting a group of warlocks mid-incantation. Kalira moved with deadly precision, cutting down enemies as she pressed toward the heart of the maw. Then she saw him. A figure cloaked in deep crimson, face hidden behind a serpent mask. His presence froze the air. Kalira knew him from Taran's stories, Malrath, warlord of the Black Sun. "You have stirred old ashes, daughter of the wind," Malrath said, "and now you will choke on flame." Kalira didn't answer. She lunged. Their clash sent shock waves through the canyon. Blade met blade, power against precision. Malrath wielded dark magic with the ease of breath, striking with both steel and spell. But Kalira had fought shadows before. She had passed the trials of fire and doubt. The battle raged until the earth cracked beneath them. Taran cried out, "Kalira! The shrine!" Now. She broke from the duel, sprinting into a hidden alcove that shimmered with invisible wards. She raised her bloody hand, the final key, and pressed it to the stone. The shrine awakened. Light burst forth, pure and blinding, and the wind howled through the maw for the first time in centuries. Serpent carvings came alive, hissing and twisting as the fourth flame ignited. Malrath staggered back, shielded his face, and vanished into shadow. Kalira dropped to one knee. Her body ached, her mind burned. Taran knelt beside her, voice trembling. "It is done. All four flames burn. The spirits of the land stir." The warriors gathered around. Though bruised and bloodied, they stood tall. Kalira rose, her voice steady. "Now the desert speaks through us. Now we reclaim what was stolen." The war was no longer coming. It had begun. Chapter 9. Rise of the Sandstorm. Kalira led her warriors from the maw in silence, the wind roaring louder than before, as if awakened by the fourth flame. The sand no longer shifted aimlessly. It moved with purpose, spiraling in strange patterns, whispering of ancient truths. The desert was waking. They returned to the oasis of Anrathi, once a place of rest, now a strategic bastion. Jaran warriors greeted them with reverence. Children clung to their mothers as Kalira passed, their wide eyes filled with awe and hope. Inside the council tent, the leaders of the allied tribes had gathered. Elder Varek, his white braids streaked with new dust, stood and bowed low. "All four flames burn again," he said. "You have done what none before dared. The time has come." Kalira stepped forward. "Then we march. The black sun will fall beneath the winds they sought to silence." Maps were unrolled. Scouts reported the Black Sun's legions gathering near the ruins of Sulkaret, ancient capital of a lost empire, now claimed by Malrath as his fortress. It was a place saturated in death and dark magic. "It is not just a battle," Taran warned. "It is a reckoning. If we fail there, the desert falls forever. Kalira turned to her warriors. We carry the blessing of the flames, the voice of the land, and the memories of our dead. We do not fail. Preparations began. Blacksmiths forged new blades of wind-hardened steel. Shamans anointed warriors with sacred oils. The tribes gathered, nomads, desert folk, exiles, all united behind Kalira, the daughter of the wind. That night, Kalira stood alone at the edge of the oasis. The stars shimmered overhead. She held the bone pendant her mother had left her, its edges worn smooth. "You walked this path before me," she whispered. "Now I finish what you began." Taran joined her. "The storm will rise with you, and the desert will answer." Dawn came crimson. Kalira mounted her steed, wind braids tied, her blade gleaming with the fire of 4 flames. Behind her rode thousands. From the dunes they emerged like a sandstorm, banners of each tribe unfurling under the sky. The drums beat with the rhythm of the earth. Toward Sul-Karet they rode, toward war, vengeance, and liberation. The wind howled, not in warning, but in song. Chapter 10. Sul-Karet. The ruins of Sul-Karet stood like broken teeth in the red sand, crumbling towers and shattered arches jutting skyward, reminders of a forgotten empire. Malrath's banners hung from every surviving spire, black cloth adorned with the coiled serpent sigil of the black sun. Fires glowed within the ruins, and the stench of dark magic lingered like rot. Kalira surveyed the battlefield from a rocky ridge overlooking the city. Beside her, Taran muttered incantations under his breath, reading the flow of power around the ruins. "There are wards," he said, "strong ones, but they flicker. The flames you lit, they weaken his hold." Below them, her warriors waited, thousands strong. Nomadic tribes once scattered by war now formed into ranks, banners of every color rising with the wind. Garesh rode along the front lines, calling orders, rallying spirits. Kalira raised her blade. The wind answered. "This is the hour we reclaim our name. Strike swift, strike hard. Let the desert rise with us." With a roar, the army surged forward. The battle for Sul-Karet began like a storm breaking. Waves of warriors crashed against Malrath's outer defenses, towers manned by sorcerers, twisted creatures bound in chains, and mercenaries promised wealth and power. The nomads met them with fury. Spears clashed, arrows sang through the air, and dust rose in choking clouds. Kalira fought at the front, her presence like a flame in a sea of shadows. Every swing of her blade carried wind, each step stirred the sand to blind her foes. She moved like prophecy made flesh. Malrath appeared atop the ruin's central tower, arms raised, his cloak billowing unnaturally. Lightning crackled from his hands, striking down warriors. He chanted in the old tongue, calling forth horror. Chapter 11. The Breath of Peace. The desert was quiet. For the first time in memory, the winds did not howl with pain, nor did the earth tremble beneath shadow. The sun rose over Sul-Karet with a golden calm, casting long rays across the broken walls and fallen banners. Kalira stood atop the dais where Malrath had fallen, her cloak stirring gently behind her. Around her, the tribes gathered, not as separate peoples, but as one. Warriors removed their helms, elders wept, and children sang the songs of old, revived by hope. Taran stepped forward, his staff aglow with residual light. The curses are lifted. The land heals. Already the oases stir with new life. Garesh arrived with a grim expression. Some Black Sun remnants fled east. Not all were destroyed. Kalara nodded. Then we must build, not only with stone, but with unity. Let the scattered know the war is done, and a future waits. She summoned the tribal leaders. Under the open sky they gathered in a circle, placing their weapons before them. No more blood between kin, she said. Let this be our pact. The winds that divided us now bind us. One people, many voices. Elder Varric placed his hand atop hers. One by one, the others followed. And thus, the Accord of Sulcaret was born. In the weeks that followed, ruins were cleared and gardens seeded. Nomadic camps gave way to shared settlements. Markets returned. Songs once sung in mourning were now sung in celebration. The spirits of the desert, once silent, could be felt again in every breeze, every grain of sand. Kalara often walked alone in the cool hours of morning, listening to the wind. Sometimes it spoke in familiar tones, a whisper of her mother, a laugh from a lost friend, the echo of battles past. The desert did not forget. One evening, Taran approached her beneath a sky full of stars. "You've returned peace," he said. "But what will you do now?" Kalara looked east, toward the horizon. The desert is wide. There are tribes still lost, voices still silenced. I will find them. You would leave this city? It's not mine to keep. Sulcaret belongs to all who fought for it. My path is still the wind. Goresh met her the next morning, saddled and ready. You didn't think I'd let you ride off without... Epilogue. The Song of the Dunes. Years passed. Sulcaret thrived, reborn from ash and myth into a center of life and trade. Travelers from distant lands now crossed the sands not with fear, but in awe of the unity the desert had forged. At its heart stood a monument, 4 flames carved into stone, and above them the silhouette of a woman with wind-blown hair and a sword of light. Children gathered at its base each evening, where old Taran told stories of Kalara, the daughter of the wind. He told of her battles, her journey, and the time she stood alone before the serpent sorcerer. But most importantly, he spoke of the days that followed, the days of peace. Goresh became a voice for the people, a steady leader who guided the Council of Tribes with honor. Taran remained Sulcaret's spiritual guardian, maintaining the balance between the old magics and the new. Kalara was rarely seen. Some said she had vanished into the deep sands. Others claimed to have glimpsed her along the edges of oases or heard her voice in the rising wind during storms. But all believed this, that when the desert calls again, when darkness stirs beyond the dunes, she will return, for the wind never forgets its daughter.